the updates. And one of the things, oh, thank you for whoever remembered to start the recording. Sorry, forgot that one. If you're like, man, I know they did all kinds of updates and there's the WisDOT design and the WisDOT sheets. I wonder what's all in there. That's what this link is here. So we've got 3 tabs we've been running since 20. WisDOT survey, WisDOT design, and WisDOT sheets. And if you link into each one of these, we've got every tool in here and documented. So you can take a look through these pages and say, okay, what's all there? If there's any that interests you or you want to get more information on, it's right there. And we've got everything that we can hook up with F1 in the interface to it as well. So, if I'm in WisDOT design, I'm like, I want to see what this assigned corridor targets thing is, F1. And there we go. So lots of stuff since 20 for getting you guys more productive and meeting the standards that we have. Another thing that we threw out, I think this hit out in November, February, something like that. We've got all of our components of our package documented at some level as well. And that's on this custom items page. Now, some of these things like styles, we don't show you every single style for every single thing. Okay, that is just too much. But if you want to know, well, what's the line types? What's available? This is either going to document it for like line types, tells you what their name is, what they do, whether they're an annotative or a non-annotative scale. Then other ones are like, like Civil 3D styles. It tells you where they're being kept and where to go look for them. Okay, so you can find them in interface. So between those two things, the first tab that I showed you is documentation of all of our interface. And second documentation, the second page is all the documentation of the resource files that we have. And that is vastly it. One other thing that literally the files are still kind of piping hot on the server. One of the things I was doing with some of our internal people was a daylight profile control. I called it a workshop. So we did some live training. If you guys did my daylight profile controlled session last fall, it's that, but I preloaded it with all the custom tools that we have for speeding up assigning corridor targets, speeding up creating control profiles, speeding up surfaces and shrink wrapping and the whole 9 yards, and bundled it all up into one topic. Got it posted literally yesterday. So it's an hour and a half worth of content. If you've never used daylight profile control, or you're like, man, I really wish I could get some samples or have somebody walk through it. It is right here. Go hit it right now. You are just losing time and money on design projects if you're not using the sub and not using all the tools around it to make it faster, better, more efficient. Okay, like I said, I'll be dropping links. Oh, that's right. I got a little more to talk about. Okay. Couple of things that have been, well, this one has been out for a little bit, but I wanted to bring everybody's attention to it. So for a while, we were running custom projections in Civil 3D. We are no longer doing that because the stock projections out of Civil 3D, based on our testing, are working fine. Couple of things about projections. Generally speaking, you do not want to apply projections to files. They are going to do something, okay? And they may do something that you really didn't intend for. So they shouldn't be used like as a piece of documentation, although that would be pretty cool. But depending on the settings of the files, you can get inadvertent translations, and that's absolutely not what you want. So you should only use it when you have a need to. So that's like, if you're using like Bing imagery, you're gonna have to use it. If you're using some GIS data from the state or from some federal source, or you got some ortho imagery and some kind of weird thing, you'll need to. If you're all in county coordinates, you know, vast majority of our projects are county coordinates. You know, if you're grabbing data from the county and they're doing US foot county coordinates too, don't need to be dealing with projections. But if you do need them, you want to use them. There's another place in the map interface. I'm just going to go into the drawing properties here. This is where I always forget that. Where most people get to it, it's under drawing. I'm always going to do this wrong. Drawing settings. Yes. Okay. So in the categories, you want to be hitting USA, Wisconsin. And like I said, the vast majority of everything is Whiskers. That's the most recent county coordinates. They're going to end with WIS CRS. Okay, that's generally speaking the ones you want. There's a metric and a US foot. If for some reason you've got an old Wisconsin county coordinate system, that's these Wisconsin county systems down here. And then there are the north and south zones and some state plane central, some zones up here as well. But you want to be basically, don't use projections unless you need to. If you need to, use them out of the USA Wisconsin category and you'll be good to go. Next item, we are rolling out a new Civil 3D project directory template. And this is kind of what it looks like. So if you've got an existing project, you do not need to like rename folders. Okay, we're just, you know, we're just migrating to a new one with new projects. It's vastly similar. We just did a lot of shortening up of the folder names and we did a little bit of rearranging. So like Sheets contains the other one here. So if you're doing your plan sheets, your DWGs drop down in here. We've still got the PDF folder. If you've got sheets for, you know, PIMs or, you know, reports or whatever, we still got the other folder. Design, I think we moved design checks up a level. And reorganized it a little bit. The FDM is going to get updated with the next one to synchronize with these changes, but I just wanted to make everybody aware. So if you do a new Civil 3D project and the folders look weird, don't freak out. It's intentional. The other thing I'll say is a reminder that making subfolders in here to organize your data however you need to, that's totally cool. We just want to have kind of the same, you know, top structure so that everybody is kind of looking at the same stuff, talking the same way about the design projects. Okay, good to remember, Keith. Back on the projections, if you do have existing projections, they're not breaking. You don't have to change them or delete them or anything. Just going forward, kind of like with the project directory thing here, for new items, you want to be using that. Okay. Now I'm done and I'll start peppering the chat. But that means somebody else is talking about cool new WisDOT tools. So if you guys have been doing PS&Es as of late, you know, we've gotten a lot more. We've gotten the contractor data packet into eSubmit. We've been improving a lot of the tools, and Steve has got a rundown of a lot of the tools, specifically the ones kind of focused at design surfaces, which is kind of one of the most challenging ones to get through and write. So I'm going to stop sharing and let Steve take the reins here.
All right, thanks, Eric. I'm just going to demonstrate a couple of our new tools for 2022, mainly the Create Verification Surface and the Cdp Integrity Report. But I'll do that while going over the whole workflow for providing break lines in a contractor data packet. So I'm just going to share a video here. WisDOT introduced a couple of new tools in Civil 3D 2022 related to contractor data packets. The contractor data packet is a collection of the exported design information that is provided to the contractor at project advertisement. I'll give an overview of the break line submittal process utilizing our new tools and highlighting a few other ones. WisDOT has a break line deliverable for a single top surface, a single datum surface, and a single rural driveway surface. However, these can be broken down per stage if that applies to your project. On the screen, I have a final top refinement surface. I've made sure that this surface is up to date, making sure my corridor surface was up to date and synced with my refinement surface. If we look at the surface definition for this surface, under the surface properties, you can see that I have a corridor surface, some grading surfaces, and break lines that make up the definition of this refinement surface. The next thing to do would be extract the break lines that will be provided to the contractor. Before we do that, I want to make sure that any files that contribute to this refinement surfaces are closed, for example, the corridor file, as well as any other files. I also want to make sure that my data shortcuts are all working properly and up to date. And the other thing to note is with the Design Surface Data Extractor tool is that it will not work if you try to use it directly on a corridor surface, and it will only work on surfaces that are pasted one level down, meaning that, say, a corridor surface is pasted into the refinement surface, that is fine. However, if you have a surface pasted within a surface pasted within the refinement surface, it will not be able to read that information beyond that one layer deep. Next, we'll go to the WisDOT Design tab, Output Panel, Contractor Data Pull Down, Design Surface Data Extractor. This opens up the tool where we can fill in a few of these areas, including clearing out the log file. Next, we'll select the design surface, our refinement all top. Our drawing template will leave as the default of xwisdot DWT. Specify the new drawing. This will be the base drawing, and then we'll add the name raw data at the end of it. And it keeps this name since the last time I used it. That's why it showed up. Next, we'll want to specify the data shortcuts project folder that is shown under our working folder. And this is the location where the tool goes to mine all the information that contributed towards the refinement surface. So if you were working off a network drive and had something saved on your C drive that was part of the refinement surface, the tool would not run. I can also validate this information, and that can be based on different tolerances for duplicate objects. For example, say a crown feature line, they can remove the duplicates within a given tolerance. It'll join those 3D polylines once it's extracted based on a tolerance. It will also look at the extracted break lines versus the design surface tin edges to make sure they match at the midpoint and at the ends. And if this information does not match, break lines will be moved to a line no match layer where they can be utilized or analyzed if needed later on. Once I have all the inputs set, I will run the tool. It will go through and open up all the source files to collect that break line information. So you can see it was opening up the corridor file, looking at the corridor surface definitions, and extracting that break line information. Next, we'll look at any duplicates, trim any data that's needed, and join that information together. And then it creates the raw data file. If we look at this file, we can hover over this information. You can see what layer it's on. I see here I have a few lines in red from this grading surface that was extracted. We may need to go back and look at that a little bit further. Next, we need to review our extracted break lines and make sure they match our design surface. Currently on our Civil 3D knowledge base, we have a manual process listing out all the steps we would need to do this. However, the new tool introduced with our 2022 rollout for Civil 3D, we have Create Verification Surface, and this will significantly automate that process. This tool is able to stay open while we switch from file to file, so I will hit the refresh button to make sure it's synced up with the current file. For a design surface, it lists out all the surfaces that are part of this data shortcut project. I'll select the refinement all top. Next, the tool is able to determine whether or not the break lines have been extracted using our WisDOT Design Surface Data Extractor tool or not. If so, we could just leave this box checked and click OK. If your break lines were generated through more of a manual method, I would unselect this and review the layers that have break line information on them. To do this, I can select a layer and hit Preview, and this will highlight the information on that layer. Same with the boundary. I can select a layer that has information and Preview to make sure I'm selecting the correct information. I can select individual layers, or I can select multiple layers at once using the Control and the Shift keys. Since I use the Design Surface Data Extractor, I will just select that box and say OK. And this is going to collect all the information that is not shown on the line no match layer. It's just the break line information that we want to include and provide to the contractors. I can close that. And I'm going to quickly save this file and call it verification. Within this file, 3 surfaces have been generated. The refinement all top surface has been data referenced from the data shortcuts. It has also created a refinement top from break lines, and that is the surface shown up with the triangles, and that surface was created from the break line information that was extracted and then passed through the verification process. It also creates a volume surface to verify the differences between the design surface and the surface created from the break lines. As you can see here, the style is elevations. Looking further into this volume surface, the analysis type has been set to elevations. The ranges we're interested in is anything less than 1/100th of a foot and anything greater than 1/100th of a foot. These gaps or differences will be highlighted in red. Looking at the Statistics tab under the General heading, we can also see the min and max elevations for this volume surface based on the differences between those two surfaces. If we zoom in here, we can see we do have some red triangles. Generally, the process would be to analyze or review the information within our subgrade shoulder points and making sure everything was good within our pavement structure, and then move beyond the subgrade shoulder points out to our slope intercepts to see that that information is all right as well. Areas that may show up in red would be transition areas, say in particular this one where we have a curb and gutter section that transitions to a shoulder section here. That's tough to get that to match exactly between using those break lines, and unless we introduced another break line in here somewhere. Another reason that we may get red shaded triangles would be due to the difference in triangulation between the design surface and how the break line surface was triangulated. Sometimes they match exactly, just that a tin edge is swapped and it shows up in red. Generally those are okay. You can check that by selecting the break line surface, and then in the contextual ribbon we could swap an edge to see if that makes any difference. So I would swap that edge and select enter. That would update the surface. In this particular case, it doesn't make much of a difference. So I'm going to undo that. However, there is no direct undo. You have to go into the definition of the brake line surface under the surface properties, under definition, and select the swap edges that you want to remove from the definition. Say OK. Rebuild the surface. If you see a lot of red areas, that may mean that something's out of sync. You may have updated the corridor but never opened the downstream refinement surface and synchronized those changes. So then the extraction is going to be out of sync. So when you extract the brake lines, it's pulling it from a more up-to-date corridor file versus what your design surface is at. So make sure that you've opened the corridor, updated the surface, and then synchronize that with the refinement surface. Re-extract the brake lines and make sure that everything looks okay. I'm going to say that this looks really good. One additional note is you're never going to get rid of all the red areas, and to use engineering judgment whether or not some of these areas needs to be solved or not, or if they're within an acceptable tolerance. Now that I've verified that all of these brake lines look correct and match my design surface, I'm going to select all these surfaces and change them to no display. So I'm left with just the brake lines. And one more step before I save this to an AutoCAD file, I still have my extraction tool open and the tooltips on. If I hover over the line work here, I see this X data and the name is based on the point code that was used to generate those feature lines, which are the brake lines for our surfaces. You also see the layer that has the name of the file and the corridor and the object that was used to generate that brake line. That's handy to the designer when troubleshooting this information, but it's not really intuitive to the contractor. So we introduced another tool towards the end of our 2020 implementation called Assign CDP Brake Line Layers. It's just a single click, and that will move all that information to a layer based on the point code. So now we have a layer called Crown, a layer called ETW, and this just helps the contractor when they're putting together their model for construction. As you can see, my surface is now out of date since I updated the layers, so I'll just rebuild that quick, and that goes away. And I will save this. And now we are ready to export this information to just a basic AutoCAD file. So I'll go to the Output tab, Export Civil 3D Drawing, file type DWG, I'll detach my XREFs. My export settings will be DWG file version 2010, and I will want this as 3D information. I'm going to save this to my project folder under the construction data, CD design, CD surface, and click export. And then it'll go through the project of exporting that. Since I'm exporting it to an AutoCAD drawing, I will not have any Civil 3D objects, and I told it not to include any XREFs. So now I can close this. I'm going to open up that AutoCAD file quick to make sure everything looks all right. Just takes a second here. If I click the button, I'll navigate to my project, construction data, CD design, CD surface. And since I'm in here, I'm going to rename that to my construction ID and call this top brake lines. Open that up. Everything looks the same as the verification file. Also want to check the layers, and you can see here I just have the layers that have information on them, and they're based on the point codes. So a clean top break lines file for the contractor to use for their project. Now I can close this file. Let's say that was the last file that we needed to complete our contractor data packet. So we can go to our project folder under construction data. And now I'm going to zip that file up. So I'll do a send to compressed folder, collects all the files that I have under my construction data folder, and I'll name this my construction ID, underbar CDP. And we can introduce the other tool that was introduced in 2022, and that is the Cdp Integrity Report. And what this tool does is make sure that all the forms have been included in the contractor data packet, as well as that all the information has been exported correctly. The tool does not check to make sure all the file types or categories have been included, and it also does not check the integrity of the design itself. It just checks that files have been exported correctly and that the forms are there. We'll select the zip file that was just created, and it automatically puts in the same path for where the report will be saved. So I'll create a report. It's an Excel file. It reads all the information within the zip file. Builds that report and opens the Excel file. I can close the dialog box. So within this file, I can see that the metadata file and our coordinate information file is included, but I did forget to include the feedback form, so I'll have to go back and do that. I see here I probably didn't export these files correctly. I have XREFs included. I also have civil 3D objects within that file. I think I had an alignment in this file, so I'll have to go back and re-export that. Also to note, we have little control on how Civil 3D exports land XML information, and in recent versions, the land XML tries to include boundary and break line information. However, we want our information to be single source, and that information resides in our DWG files for our break lines and boundary information. So we do have a workflow documented on our Civil 3D knowledge base, and what that involves is opening a new file, data referencing in the design surface, and then exporting it to land XML, which I did here in this version 2, and you can see that that message goes away. And it will also typically significantly reduce your existing surface file size. Another thing that the report points out is any extra files that have been included, like a backup file or a temporary lock file for either Civil 3D or Word that were open when you created the zip file for your contractor data packet. So what we want to do is make sure that these packets are as clean as possible. So you go through and delete these files, update these files, and then recreate a zip file, rerun the tool, and make sure that everything is clean and that you don't read any messages. Our end goal is to provide as clean a contractor data packet as possible to our contractors so they don't have to look through any extra information. The CDP Integrity Report is not included in the contractor data packet. It's just for your use before e-submitting this information. So that is the final step in creating that packet. All our information is shown on our Civil 3D knowledge base to create this information. It's under digital data. The forms are available here, as well as the steps for creating our exported information. All right. Thanks, Eric, for putting those links in the chat. that's where you can find more information in the FDM and the in our knowledge base. If anybody has any questions, otherwise I think Keith is up next.
While he's switching over, just a couple of quick reminders. So contractor data packet is basically whatever data you use to put your plan set together. That's what should be included in there.
Right.
And for earthwork jobs, that basically means we're getting into surfaces. It's one top and one datum subgrade type of surface. And the reason why we do all these tools is because what the earthwork contractors want really are those feature lines, those source items, because they're going to create their own surfaces with construction focus and all that. So that's really, really difficult to get out of, particularly multiple corridors all at the same time into one surface. So if you've created a single surface for top and datum, you're all ready to go with this tool set.
Yep, that's correct.
Cool.
I'm up, huh?
You are up.
You got it.
Okay.
Knock your socks off, man.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to cover a couple topics here. One, we introduced a new intersection site distance workflow and tool with Civil 3D22. And we also introduced some enhanced functionality with our layer states palette that I'd like to cover. So starting with the intersection site distance, the tool I'll be covering is found on the WisDOT tab, WisDOT design tab under Analyze Panel Visibility Check. You'll find intersection site distance. And you're also going to notice in the video, I'm using another tool called Create Wall Surface. That one's located underneath the Surfaces pull down and Create Wall Surface. So I'll just go ahead and kick that video off, and then we'll move on to the layer states.
This is a demonstration of the new WisDOT intersection site distance analysis tool. So we have a fictitious scenario here. We've got an intersection that we are relocating to flatten this horizontal curve. You can see we have our slope intercepts for our proposed design, and we want to see how well we can see from the intersection through the curve, make sure we have adequate intersection site distance. We also want to do some checks on this driveway over here. The property owner is indicating that they desire to put a new outbuilding in this field, in this location. So we have that sketched in here. So there's a few things we need to check. One, can we see across this tree line through the curve? Our slope intercepts are taking out some trees, but so we move the tree line back here, and we want to know if we can see through the tree line or not. We have a short stretch of beam guard, which I've represented with a feature line. And we've also represented the building with a feature line, and the new tree line is with a feature line. So the intersection site distance tool will look at your existing terrain as well as obstruction surfaces. We're going to create obstruction surfaces with the feature lines we've created. We have a new tool called DOT Create Wall Surface. We call these wall surfaces because the surfaces are created with a wall break line. So all we need is a single feature line, 3D polyline, or survey figure. And that will be automatically added to a new surface called a wall surface as a wall break line. So let's try it out. First thing we're going to do is we're going to try, and we're going to select this this feature line that represents the new tree line. So I'll select that. I'm going to pick the side to offset, Let's go ahead and pick over here. And the trees, we're going with about 30 feet high. So I'll hit 30 and type enter. Now you can see a very thin surface has been created. I can go ahead and go to my object viewer. And we have what looks like a wall. That's why we call it a wall surface. We can do the same thing with our beam guard over here. DOT create wall surface. Select my feature line. I'm going to pick on the inside of this. My beam guard is 2.3125 feet high. And now we have a box basically that represents the envelope of that beam guard. And one more obstruction that we're concerned about is the proposed building here. So we're going to, again, run the command. I'll select it. I'm going to pick on the inside. And the building is going to be approximately 20 feet high. Let's go ahead and check that in Object Viewer. There's my building. So now that we have our obstructions in place, we can go ahead and run the site distance tool. It's also worth noting that we've combined our corridor top surface with our existing ground surface into a single surface. That's going to be our terrain that we check with. To run the site distance analysis, I'm going to go to the WisDOT Design tab, the Visibility Check menu, and check intersection site distance. This is a modeless dialog box, so you can't interact with Civil 3D while using the tool. The first thing we're going to do is pick our decision point. So at the intersection, I'm just going to snap to a location that I've already determined. And then we're going to check our vehicle path. I'm going to check for a right turn. So that means I'm going to check vehicles coming from the left. So I'll select the path, and this path is just a 2D polyline down the center of the lane. We want to be sure to select the polyline in the direction that the vehicles are coming from, or the direction we are looking. If I select over here, it's going to check site distance in this direction, which isn't what we're looking for in this case. We want to check over here. So I'm going to select the polyline in this direction. I get a check mark to indicate that I have a successful selection. I'm going to check a car. I can also check a truck. And if I look in the FDM, I can get my the site distance that I need. And in this case, it's 710 feet. My terrain surface is my combination existing and top. And I'm going to select all my wall surfaces as possible obstructions. I'll click OK. And you can see we do have impaired visibility due to the tree line. We can go ahead and view this in 3 dimensions to get a better idea of the situation. So here we're looking from the intersection. The yellow represents that tree line. You can see that we were able to see over the beam guard, probably due to the super elevation of the curve. So that's good news. We don't have to worry about the beam guard, but the tree line, we're still going to want to cut back a little bit more to make sure we get our visibility. So we actually achieved 493 feet of site distance, as indicated by the text at the end of the green sight lines. Now we want to do the same thing from this driveway over here. I'm just going to go ahead and hide this other one. And I can keep my same vehicle path, but now I want to move my decision point over to the driveway. So I'm just going to pick a point on the driveway. Everything else is the same. So I just got to click OK. And now you can see that we have impaired vision due to that outbuilding. Again, we can look at 3D. And here you can see that the sight lines clearly hit the building, and they also hit the tree line.
Okay. Any questions on the sight distance?
So that, I mean, I was just trying to think of what's different about this than like the visual zone stuff in product that really doesn't deal with the whole idea of obstruction surfaces and setting a distance and picking the paths. So this is really the only option for a full 3D engineering correct analysis of this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And you could use it, I mean, I was just trying to think of like, you know, anytime you're trying to do obstruction, you know, obviously intersection is the big one, but like, you know, sitting at a roundabout, seeing what you could see, or anytime that you get into like a bridge parapet or any kind of visual obstruction, this would work with for decision point, path, set up your surface, set up your obstructions, right?
Yep.
Cool.
Couple questions came in. Does it also check vertical on the combined surface, such as a crest curve? Yeah, so it's looking at the surface holistically. I mean, it's taking where your eye is, it's drawing lines to where the object, or to the where the object should be, and if it encounters your terrain surface, it'll let you know. Other question that came in, are the sight distance objects able to be saved, or are they temporary? They're not temporary, they're actual AutoCAD line objects, and they're combined into a single group. So you can select either the lines individually, or you can select them as a group if, say, you want to delete that whole analysis and start over again. And you also have layer control over those objects too.
And if you need to do stopping sight distance checks, that's in there too. It's just a different tool. So you've got different distances on like Crest and Sag. It's under that, if you could hit it, Keith, under that analyze visibility check area.
Well, that's actually coming out in our next update.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we got a whole new thing for regular sight distance as well. So something to look forward to in mid to late May.
Cool.
All right. Got 7 minutes left. I'm gonna go through layer states real quick here. I have an example drawing here, and just typical, you know, starting out maybe a plan sheet drawing. I X-reference in my topo, I X-reference in my utilities. And I'm just gonna make a real quick plan sheet as an example. Something simple. And while I'm at it, I'll use this opportunity to show off another tool that we have. If you go to WisDOT Sheets, under Sheet Tools, we've got this, where is it now? Align Viewport. If you select your viewport on the sheet, it jumps to model space, and you can just go ahead and quickly align where you want your sheet. And it asks you, do you want to set the width or scale? I'll pick scale in this case because I know my scale. I want it to be 50. And I've got my plan sheet. So a real quick and easy way to get a plan sheet in less than a minute. So in the past, we've always had our layer states palette. And let me open that up quick. To get to our layer states palette, you go to any one of our WisDOT ribbon tabs, and under the Manage panel, you have layer states palette. And we've always prepackaged these, but the barrier that's always been in place is we can prepackage layer states all we want, but they never could be applied to X references because X references get their own unique layer. The layers within an X reference are always preceded by the X reference name. So unless everybody's naming all their drawings exactly the same, we would not be able to prepackage that. Well, we've found a way to work around that with some additional coding with Civil 3D 2022. So now when you access your layer states palette, let's say I wanted to plot this particular sheet with all my utilities in color. So I've got my set utilities to plot in color. It changes not only the layers for the current drawing, but it also adjusts the layers for the X reference drawing. So I can quickly move through these. What this does is it imports the layer state, it applies the layer state, and it modifies the layer state for whatever your X reference names are in this drawing. So you can just very easily just click these, and it's going to adjust the layer state accordingly. I can always go back to my regular stock layer state up on top here to get back to where I started. And then once those are imported, they will appear in your layer states manager. So if you do need to maybe adjust these for anything custom you might have going on, you can always do that. Just note that if you do that and you use these buttons again, it's going to overwrite that layer state. So if you do need to make custom adjustments, you're going to want to go into layer state manager and then rename it so you have your own. And then when you use the button, it's going to re-import the layer state and apply it as defined. So that should save, a lot of time for people, doing plan sheets for, utility plans and things like that. If you need to apply these layer states, you won't have to manually go through the layers and figure out which layers in my X references I need to adjust the color for and things like that. This just handles that automatically. Any questions on layer states?
I'm just going to say, I think you totally buried the lead putting this one last, because I can't count the number of hours I tried to explain how to people to do this, and you got it in a one button push now. That's sweet.
All right, well, that's all I had then.
Okay, we're basically at the top of the hour, but if anybody's got a quick question you want to throw in the chat or shout out, go ahead. Otherwise, that's all the content we had for today. Thank you very much, and we'll be seeing you later.